Well, hello. Today is the 1952 Korean War movie Retreat Hell. In 1950, the Marines call up reservists to fight the war in Korea. Paul Hansen is one and must take his family to a base. He is put in charge of Baker Company. He supervises the training of this company. They get sent to Korea and participate in the Incheon landings. They then move on to Seoul and take the capital of South Korea. The unit then moves north into North Korea. They get ambushed by a tank and discover that Chinese soldiers have entered the war. The unit is attacked by massive numbers of Chinese soldiers. They dangerously run low on ammunition. Fortunately, an airdrop resupplies them just in the nick of time. They then must make a fighting retreat to the sea. They have to battle constant ambushes that whittle their numbers down. They then don't make it to the sea and freedom. So this movie is about the 1st Marine Battalion in Korea. And, it received a lot of help from the Marine Corps. They were allowed to film at Camp Pendleton and use Marines as extras. They put a lot of gypsum around the area to simulate snow. The producers estimate that the Marines' help was worth about $1 million, which is pretty good because, this movie probably helped make them a profit. And they also helped create authentic Korean villages that they built up to use. Now, of course, the title, it comes from a quote from General Oliver P. Smith, who was asked about the retreat from Chosin Reservoir. And he said, "Retreat hell, we're just attacking in a different direction." And also the studio didn't really want hell in the title at first because, back then they were very sensitive to such swear words, I guess. But the Marines did, convince them to keep that title, which I'm glad they did because I think it's a good title for the movie. And of course, this is mainly about, a real life event, the Korean War. When it started, America was scrambling for troops, and they called in a lot of the reserves and that, and they were veterans of World War II who had settled down, had families and stuff, and then had them kind of uprooted and back in the military, fight a war. And I think the main protagonist, Paul Hansen, he really did a great job of that. He was just a guy. He was a lot worried about his kids and his family, his wife, and he didn't really want to be there, but he did his duty, and they went to the war, and it simulated it really well. I thought the training and the his conflicts and that, and the battle where they landed at Incheon with and took Seoul and that, not really easy. And then of course the main one was the Chosin Reservoir, which was in North Korea. And this is when the Chinese entered the war. So there was like about 30,000 Marines against 120,000 Chinese soldiers. And, Chairman Mao wanted this unit wiped out. But, they held them off. And, they made a very fighting retreat, which I think was, portrayed excellently as, Chinese were more interested in causing casualties because that just made it more difficult for them to retreat. But the Marines made it out. They also took all their dead and all their wounded and all their equipment. It's like one of the more heroic stories from the Korean War. And they were fighting in temperatures below 36 degrees Fahrenheit, and they had to make a 78-mile trek through all this. And I think this movie is considered one of the most accurate to portray the Korean War, and I think I enjoy this very much. I think it's a real tribute to our Marines who fought for us there, and I think it's a very excellent movie. I highly recommend it if you like war movies. You'll get a very enjoyable one. So, if you stuck with me this long, I thank you. You're a unique individual.